ready? Set. And...
Action.
Is it that? That.
Chop it up anyway.
Action. Okay, welcome to the Prep Coach Podcast. It's a live recording. We're at the retreat at the moment. Everyone want to yell out and say hi? I think last time we did this, I was kind of slightly nervous because I've never done a live potty, but now I feel a little bit more comfortable. I feel like we've done our seminars in this room, we're comfortable with everyone, we've been here for nearly the full week. It's Saturday that we're recording this,
Yep.
So I think last time we pretty much did nearly up front, so it's a bit of nerves, but I'm feeling good.
That's good.
So we got a decent amount of questions. Some of them are a bit tricky, and I think some of them maybe came from this room, which is fun, and we're not going to try to guess who sent them through. But I think maybe we just kick it off by saying, obviously we're missing MG at the moment, but he's here in spirit. He couldn't make the recording. He's got other commitments, but
We're going to hold it down with that. We're going to try.
It's not the first time we've done it.
Yeah, we're going to try.
How are you feeling about the week? How do you feel about how everything's going at the moment?
Yeah, good. I feel like the first few days were pretty chaotic when we got to Bali. I obviously got there a little bit earlier, but we obviously had the NBA Bali show, which we'll touch on in a little bit, but it was pretty full on. I think we can all attest to that. But it was really good. It was good to get over to Bali. I had a bit of family time before you guys got here. I got here on the Tuesday, you guys got here Wednesday night.
Yep.
And then it was pretty much from Thursday onwards, I was staying a little bit further out. But you guys were holding down the athlete village at the Blue Z, which is where we're at right now, which was awesome. And I think as far as the show goes, it couldn't have gone any better, with the exception of maybe, should we talk about,
Yeah, let's go straight into the show.
Yeah, so poor old Stewie. To be fair, a few people went down with Bali Belly.
Yeah.
Stewie, the head judge, unfortunately copped it pretty bad on show day, and he was basically having to sleep backstage behind the show, which was no good. But thankfully, Joey Cantlin was absolutely huge. He held it down, and all the other judges as well. They did a really good job, and honestly, visualizing it, and I think for me, I was probably a little bit more nervous because it probably was my baby, so to speak. Like, I'd done all the back end, all the organising, and we were there very, very late the night before, just ironing out some of the creases. But I think the show itself, seeing everything set up and the lights and the production, it really was a spectacle. I think we took a lot of people by surprise from a production standpoint. Obviously, NBA is known for that, but I think a lot of people, when they saw it, even my wife, Jen, when she walked in, she was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And I think we all were...
Oh, it's more than what I expected to be honest.
Yeah, so there was definitely a lot of moving parts to bring it to fruition, but equally, you know, I think we've established some really good relationships with those guys, and that's going to be crucial for us as we go forward next year, in terms of, as always, when we run a show, we get out the red pen and we're like, what can we do better? What do we need to do to clean it up? And we've got a list of things that we'll do differently. But I think as a first show, to have so many different countries, I think that one of the first lineups of the day, there was someone from France, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Australia, and I think there was one Australian. Yeah, it was
all internationals. Yeah.
So even just seeing that at our first international show was pretty special. And I think everyone had a really, really good day. Obviously, unfortunately, Stewie went down, but I think, speaking for him, you know, he was very grateful that as a team and as an organisation, we were still able to just run full steam, and I think that just speaks to our processes and the way we do things. And obviously, we had some amazing helpers. We will go through probably some of them. I think one of them may have actually asked a question as a door helper, perhaps.
Oh yeah.
I was talking about Maddie, and he'll be loving it.
Yeah.
But he and Rochelle were awesome. They actually flew over to give us a chop out, which was awesome.
Yeah.
We had Artie Ray, who we have a very good relationship with. He was good enough to come down to the show, and we actually were at his show the night before as well.
That's right, yeah.
And saw all of those locals compete, which was awesome, and we got to catch up with Bobby as well. So I think just as a week, it was really, really big. But I know for me, I think once that show was done, there was a massive sense of just relief. Like, I'm like, the retreat starts on the Monday. This is the easy part, you know, with all our regular crew. And but yeah, I was just super proud and just happy that it all went off without a hitch. How about you?
I think a lot of credit does go to you, because you pretty much did all the communication and organisation of you know, the events, the audio-visual setup, the whole setup of the whole place. Like, none of us really got involved unless a decision needed to be made and needed our help. So
if it was bad, it was all going to be on you.
It was all going to be on you. But, like, yeah, credit goes to you, mate.
No, it was a team effort. Like, the back-end stuff, yeah, it was probably more so me, but equally kind of like the retreat. Once we have those relationships, like now, the process is doing it the first time. You know, now next year will very much be pretty turnkey with some adjustments.
Yeah.
Charles will definitely be sitting in on some of those lighting meetings, but I'm not a lighting executive. Every show he and I push each other, but it was awesome. It was a great show. We got some great content. I think most importantly, the athletes, and there's some of them in the room who could probably speak to it. I think one of the biggest things for me, and equally conveying that message to the production team, was that it really needs to be athlete-centric, and we really wanted to make it about them, to have the screens, to see their name and their, you know, Australian or Indonesian flag or Sri Lankan flag come up on the screen. It was pretty cool to see that. And again, as coaches and athletes, you think about if you were at that show, and equally we were saying, like, you know, I wish I could have jumped in that show, because it really was it was a spectacle. So I think it was nice to be able to give everyone that experience and have that send off. A lot of them was their last show of the season. And it was a really good day.
Yeah, like, it is a really, really big deal for someone to travel overseas.
Yeah.
Maybe to someone they've never been before, and they're in prep. They've got to obviously continue to tick all the boxes, get everything done, and also compete, you know, internationally. So yeah, we're grateful for all the athletes that did actually do that, because it is a big leap, and there's a lot of that needs to go into it, and obviously there's a lot of cost on their side, and they need to go into it too. So
yeah, especially the guys from France and Sri Lanka, to get their visas, those guys had a pretty hard time to go through that. It's not an easy thing to do that. So I think, again, you know, we really wanted, for that reason, it wasn't just another show for us. We wanted to make sure that you're traveling all this way, spending all that money. We really wanted to make sure it was an experience that they wouldn't forget, and I think it was.
Yeah, definitely. So leading into the show, we also had athletes staying here at the Blue Z.
Yeah.
And I think that was awesome too. I know you weren't staying here at the time, it was me and MG, but it was really, really good to connect with them, get to know them, build relationships, and help them too, because we did have a lot of that. We had a lot of questions that came through about how to navigate certain situations. Then we went to training together, all that kind of stuff. So I love that part. Like, even the retreat, I love that part too. Just like seeing people enjoy themselves and maybe be around people that they're not normally around and don't have that opportunity. That's what I love to see. So having that kind of athlete village experience, and also the retreat, is like my favorite part of Bali. Like, the show was absolutely amazing. It's good for us. It's a bit of a stress because we're there, we're like, is anything going to go wrong? Is everyone having a good time? But to see everyone having a good time at the athlete village, together, getting to know each other, doing posing together, all that kind of stuff. And also having the judges stay here. Lanita would jump in and give a bit of a feedback too. And she actually, so shout out to her.
She was awesome.
She was awesome. So the night before was the Artie Ray show at Ray's Fitness. And then she obviously spoke to some of the Indonesian athletes. The next morning she had them meet her here, and she did posing with them. Like, that's going above and beyond.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, as we said, for Joey to step up, to be the head judge, and just bring that vibe that we really, really wanted. And him and MG just bounced off each other, because MG's that type of personality too. So to see them go backwards and forwards and make a show of it.
Especially coming off, he had a monster week.
Yeah, he did.
I was speaking to him at the ICN Nationals. I was like, bro, aren't you going to Dubai this week? He's like, yeah, I am. So he was in Dubai, and then literally finished the show. I think he got on a plane, got to Bali, poor bloke, and then I know he was just like, I'm just dying to sleep in an actual bed as opposed to a plane. And then judged, absolutely crushed it. You wouldn't have even known. He was energetic. He's epic. So we were really lucky to have him there. And then he was out the next day, and I think most of the judges were out the next day as well. And we obviously we stayed on, and then here we are with the retreat.
Started the retreat. We're into Saturday now, coming towards the end of it. So we've got obviously tomorrow, and then everyone checks out on Monday, which will be a sad moment. I know some people actually staying on too, and I think they're connected and maybe are going to stay together or do things together. So that's really, really good to see also. But the retreat's been a lot of fun. Obviously a little bit different to the first one we had. Lessons learned, made some changes. So at the moment, without pretending no one's here, I'm really happy with how everything's going.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, really, really happy. So, we've made the decision that we are only going to run it once a year now when we have the Bali show off the back end of that. So, looking forward to the next one, but I'm super keen to finish off this one and finish on a bit of a high at the end there too.
Yeah, I think it's been good, and hopefully everyone else has enjoyed it. It's funny, people on socials, at least in my DMs in the first few days, especially after the ATVs, everyone's like, I want to come on the retreat next year. So, we're going to have to think about spots, because the way we ran it this time was a little bit of a smaller group than the first one, and I think it worked really, really well. So we are really going to try to cap it to keep it intimate and try to, so it's going to be interesting when we open up spots to make sure that we keep it within reasonable boundaries of how many people we obviously let on. And for anyone asking, because I already have had people DM me asking that, it'll be on the Monday after the NBA show.
Yeah. So
it's like the 27th or something, I think.
Yeah. All right, you want to get into some questions?
Let's do it.
Cool, let's do it. All right. So this is the one you're talking about, Maddie and Rochelle. Who was a really cool guy and chick at the door at Nationals? What a top bloke. That's Maddie and Rochelle.
That is. He was awesome. I don't know whether you guys could actually hear him. Yeah. He was going crazy. It doesn't matter whether he even knew who you were. He was just bringing the atmosphere, and Rochelle was awesome as well. Her and Jen were going back and forth, getting athletes backstage. Those guys are just awesome humans. Yeah. And it was definitely good having them at the show. Rochelle's actually going to be doing that show.
Yeah, she's doing it next year, which is going to be exciting.
It's going to be really good.
She was a little bit upset that she can't do the Vic titles because there's a lot of people here that are from Vic. She's like, my friends aren't going to be there. I said, don't worry, they'll come to Bali and watch it. It's all good. That's it. Yeah. But they're awesome. Like, they helped us at Nationals. They put their hand up. They were there both days from when we got there until when we left, and then they came to Bali just to help us. They just wanted to come and help. So, and they connected with some of the other families that were here, like Chin Chin's family, Chloe, that kind of stuff. So it was really, really good to have them. So we appreciate you guys, all right? All right, let's move on. At ICN Nationals, I noticed some state presidents sitting at the judges' table, saw MT talking to Tony, and then they moved. What did he say? So someone is very perceptive of that day and what happened. So that did happen, and honestly, it was out of the goodness of my heart to tell Tony, because people were whispering of like, what's going on, why are they sitting there, that kind of stuff. So I could have just let it play out and just get everyone to be annoyed with it, but I just pulled Tony aside. I said, look, just want to let you know there's a president or two sitting there. They're kind of talking to the judge of that state, and then
on Sunday.
I was only there on Sunday.
Yeah.
And then that judge is then talking to the head judge, and people can see this movement happening on stage, and maybe those states are getting placings over other people. I said maybe it's all legitimate. Maybe those people were the worthy winners. I was like, just the perception doesn't look amazing. So he did understand that. And I think straight away he corrected it, and he went over and spoke to that president, and he shifted them. He didn't shift them off the table, which is, for me, running NBA, I would have taken them completely away. I get it. If a president wants to sit close, maybe have like a VIP section to just the president sit so they can be...
Or a separate pit behind.
Yes, or really, really close. To have them on the table from a perception perspective, people can get the wrong idea. Even if nothing is going wrong, they can just get the wrong idea. So that's what I said to Tony, and he reacted on it straight away. So props to Tony to do that.
Yeah.
All right, next one, which is maybe someone here wrote this one, because we did discuss this the other day, and we've been discussing it today. ICN Worlds are giving pro cards per height class. Why have they changed the rules back to the old rules? Didn't Tony change the rules to the new rules to make winning a pro card more prestigious? So I didn't know that Worlds was going to go like that. I didn't know ICN Worlds was going to have pro cards per height class, and we actually spoke about this in the group. I think it came up, we were sitting in the pool the other day, and it came up. So Season A is run, ICN Nationals is run in New South Wales. And
this year it was.
Yeah, and actually it's been through the majority of the years.
Yeah, next year it's not.
Next year it's not, but they normally do pro cards per height class, right?
Oh, okay.
But then that still stayed in place this year.
Did that happen this year?
It did, right? I'm pretty sure.
Because I know Wayne, you won the overall and you got your pro card in Season 8, didn't you?
They didn't give me, but yes, overall.
Just per high class?
Oh, pro cards.
Yeah, was it pro card per high class?
No, that was just overall.
Just
because you won the overall and you got yours. So season A it was.
So they went to the new rules.
The new rules where you got to win the Mr. or Mrs.
Yeah, only overall though.
Overall with the pro card.
Okay.
Open class 1 called Vincent. He won the open class 1. They still haven't given.
He didn't get a pro card, but did he go on the pro qualifier with you? There wasn't a pro show. So he wouldn't have got a pro show. So only you got one because you won the overall.
So season A nationals, they did go to the new rules. It's
technically the old rules of how it used to be. You had to
now
win the overall.
But now, back in the day. But yeah, let's just say it's the new rule that he wanted to re-implement.
Yeah.
Let's call that.
Yeah.
Where you had to win the overall amateur to get your pro card, and then obviously nationals in season B this year, they stuck to that rule.
At the nationals,
yeah.
Tony actually said that.
But then the Worlds is doing the old rules,
right?
Where you get a pro card per height class.
Okay.
And the person's saying, well, the reason why that rule was changed to overall was to make it more prestigious. And, we heard Tony and National saying, it's pro cards are earned, etc., etc. But then they've gone back, so they're asking us why that is the case.
I don't know.
I don't know why.
Maybe it's because it's the world.
Yeah, it could be. I'm not too sure what they do with other world titles in other countries. And that's what they do there. But I'm not too sure.
When they did the Worlds here in Bali, when I did it in 2017, the pro show, you had to win. I didn't do the amateur show, but even the amateurs, you still had to win the overall at the Worlds.
Yeah.
But it may have changed.
Well, I know in Korea, it was high class, right? Or was it over?
No, it was overall.
It was overall amateur?
Yeah.
It was, okay. Yeah, so they've gone back. I'm not too sure why. Maybe it's a good incentive.
Yeah, like from a
marketing,
advertising, marketing perspective,
to get people
100%. Yeah, like as a promoter, I can definitely see why you would, but I don't know.
Yeah, not too sure. And then I know today people have been following it, and they've seen pro cards being given out even in other categories like at 40 pluses and things like that. So I'm not too sure if that means they're giving Masters pro cards out or I'm not too sure. We'll have to digress and get back to this.
Just figure over 52 kilos got a pro card.
Okay.
Yeah, so because I saw a 40 plus, and I maybe my assumption was maybe I didn't even know they did pro cards, as in Masters pro cards. Maybe that's what it is, a Masters pro card.
But they're just saying now that a figure.
Miss Figure over 52 kilo, Miss Figure open, and she got a pro card.
So is it referenced as a Masters pro card?
No. It's just got the standard ICN Pro Card.
Is it maybe based on judges' merit?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I thought it was per high class, and that's what it was advertised as. But it sounds like they're giving more away than that.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. Okay.
I don't know. I don't. Yeah.
We'll have to get back to everyone on that. Okay, we've already covered this. NBA Bali looked incredible. Not what I expected based on what other shows have happened in Bali. Was there an athlete village? So yeah, we kind of spoke about that one. We can skip through there. Can I come to the next retreat? Yes, we kind of spoke about that one too. We'll release dates shortly and open it up. All right, let's move into the next one. Recovery phase. How to enjoy a tracked meal out without being overcome by guilt. The word tracked meal out is like must be, it's obviously a guesstimated meal out, but yeah, they're probably trying to put it. So I actually had this question from a client saying, you've allocated 2 untracked meals in my plan. So what do I do? Do I create a budget for it and then just go in and eat, saying, I'm going to have an 800 calorie budget and be like, that meal I'm going to have is about 800 calories, or do I try to guesstimate it in my MyFitnessPal to make it even more accurate? What do I do? I kind of said both. I say, if you can kind of pick a meal out that you kind of know you could put in MyFitnessPal and track, like eggs on toast, avocado, bacon, like that can be tracked pretty easily in MyFitnessPal. You can kind of guess rough sizes and metrics. But if you're going to go out and maybe have, I don't know, a mixed meal
or a buffet or something,
that can't be technically tracked or even guesstimated in MyFitnessPal. That's more of a just allow a budget and try to stay within those boundaries. But how to do that without feeling guilty in the recovery phase?
Yeah, I think in the recovery phase, firstly, I think athlete context dependent is important in that if you have someone, say some girls guys, you may have a rate of gain prediction that you want to see, like that's something that I'm big on. Within the first sort of 10 to 14 days, we're looking at getting some essential fat mass back on, and so it may be 3 or 4 kilos. If you're bringing up someone's food by, say it's 1,000 calories and they're staying true to that, if you're working off a premise of being, again, if they were on X amount of food and they're technically in a deficit, then they may not even be in a 7,000 weekly net surplus. So, and if you work off a premise of 1 kilogram of mixed human tissue is around 6,000 calories, but equally you're going to get restoration of glycogen, some fluid, more food going through gastric motility. So all of those things, you're probably going to see more of an increase, but I don't necessarily know that all of it is adiposity. But I think when you're allowing for a 3 or 4 kilo gain, I know if I'm like, I want you to gain 3 or 4 kilos in the first week, not all of that's going to be fat mass. Like I said, glycogen, fluid, more food. But if you're on, say, a magic number, I want you to hit 3,500 calories, right? And then usually their dinner meal is going to be 750 calories for that meal. You might just say to them, I want you to be hitting around, low 3,000s-ish, go out, allow for about 1,000 calories. A couple of hundred calories more, especially when you're trying to get someone to regain some body weight and some body fat, is not a big deal. Everyone thinks that it is. When they wake up the next day and their weight spikes, it's usually sodium, more fat, and then just delayed gastric emptying. But I think the guilt element, as long as, and this probably comes down to the coach communicating really well in advance that we're no longer in a deficit anymore. Again, I'm a big advocate of using infographics or schematics to show exactly what we're looking at. This is where I want you to be between week 1 and week 2. If you can see in the first few weeks that your weight is just gradually trickling up. We had a seminar on this during the week. We know that it's not going to be overly beneficial for you. So I think you have to accept that, yeah, it's okay to go and have some food. Equally, you want to be mindful that you don't want to eat like an asshole. So you would usually say in those first few weeks, stick to some foods that you usually eat. So maybe you're hanging for a pizza, have homemade pizzas at home. Say, I'm going to have a pizza and I'm going to put whatever toppings I'm going to use. I'm going to use light tasty cheese so it's not as fatty, so it'll digest a bit better. And I'm going to have a Coke Zero, and then, for dessert, rather than buying, say, a tub of ice cream or something and eating ad libitum, I'm going to have 8 ice cream on a stick, and then once I've had that, the meal is done. And so I think just having a bit of forward planning, because as some of you guys probably found in the early part of the week when you and for those watching this, I'm talking about the people in the group here, you may have just finished your prep and you're eating, and so all of a sudden I can eat what I want, and you may just make a random meal that usually wouldn't be within your scope of, and I'm not hanging this on you just to do that, but it is an example that rings true, but it's something that's so miscellaneous that you wouldn't really think, oh, I'm just going to have this and this. It might be a couple of eggs, bacon, some cheese, whatever on normal bread, probably not accounting that maybe each of those has 25 grams of fat, as to the next one you have 2 of them. It doesn't sound too bad, but if you're someone that's been having like 45 grams of fat in a whole day and you have 1.2 to 1.5 of that in one meal, your stomach's not going to be overly enthused about that. So it's one of those things. So I think as long as it's communicated well, and again, you're not tying food as good or bad, it's more just you should have, like we were talking about yesterday with the menu, in terms of these are some of the foods within the first 2 weeks that I think are within our scope, and I think communicating that to the athlete is really valuable too, so that they know, is a burger and chips or is donuts a good idea in the first few weeks? Probably not. And equally just communicating with your coach and them saying, you don't have to feel guilty, it's food. It may have a little bit more of a higher energy profile than what you would usually have for dinner, but equally the enjoyment factor and the social element is, I would say, in a lot of ways supersedes that, because you get to be around your family or maybe your partner, you haven't been out for dinner together. So I think as long as you've communicated and there is a bit of foresight in terms of what you're doing, it's fine.
I can't really add too much to that, because I think that it comes from the coach too a little bit too, where you say that is actually part of your plan. If you go have an untracked meal, it is part of your plan. Don't feel guilty, I'm telling you to do it. If you do that, you're actually adherent. So I think making sure the coach communicates that. And then I think sometimes people think that they should feel guilty when like things change. Like all of a sudden now I'm allowed to enjoy myself and I feel guilty for it. So I think just it takes a little bit of time to change that mindset, and maybe the first meal they might feel guilty, but then I'm sure over time, as they move through the recovery phase and get to the off season, it'll just be back to general life.
I think a lot of athletes too, and I think back to one of my guys who checked in, Hayden, who did the show in Bali, and we had a plan for his week, everything's tracking well, but he had been eating some different food, still within the lines of what we had set for him. But his comment to me in his check-in last night was that he's like, I really can't wait to get back into what I've been eating. I thought I was missing out on not having this or that, when in reality, it just has sort of reinforced that I like what I like, and granted it's nice that he can maybe just make up for his dinner a bowl of, you know, chicken and rice and burrito bowl, whatever, and not have to stress about the exact amount and just drizzle some trees on it and maybe not have to weigh it, versus thinking that, you know, I wish I could have that, I wish I could have that. So I think for a lot of people, they're probably the ones that tend to really embrace all elements of being a physique athlete in the improvement season. You know, maybe what you think is, or what you expect to think that is going to be what you're going to want to eat, what you're going to want to have after prep, and a lot of times it's not really like that.
Yeah, I know probably a lot of people can say this too, is, and I'm not a food focused person, I don't eat out, but I started to create a list of things that I wanted to have post-comp, and I think I did maybe one or two I did, and that was it. So I think sometimes sometimes the grass isn't green on the other side, but even when you get there, you don't roll around in it as much as what you think you're going to enjoy yourself.
And equally, anecdotally speaking, most people we're definitely both in this camp, and I'd say probably half my athletes are as well. Those that aren't really phased about what they eat and tend to eat the same things in the off season as they do when they're in prep, they don't have any issues with dieting, embracing the suck. They can go as long as they have to go, because they're not tied to, I really want to eat that, or I want to try and make some crazy waffle pancake thing with protein and make it fit my macros. They're just happy to eat what they've been eating. There's less food focus, and they just get on with business.
Awesome. Let's go to the next one, because it's kind of similar. Does food focus and thoughts does food focus and thoughts ever fully go back to normal after a prep? Right now I feel like I'm always thinking about eating food or eating more or waiting for my next meal, even though I'm not actually hungry. So it sounds like someone's just come out of prep, but they're kind of having that food focus still and wondering if it's ever going to go away.
Yeah, so food-seeking behaviours are normal when you've been in an extended period of energy deprivation. So it's physiologically your body is encouraging those behaviours because it's been in a period of deprivation. It's seeking energy, like your energetic daily tasks are superseding how much food you're eating. So it's natural that, and we say this all the time, your body is so smart. If it wants you to regain some fat mass, it's going to do what it can to try and help to facilitate that. So it's normal to start to want to eat those things, but usually what you'll find is, and this is where sometimes people can regain a lot really quickly, and they're like, I don't understand, I still am thinking about food, but that's where that time element, which we were talking about earlier in the week, comes into play. And once you have established, a nice set point from a body composition standpoint, and you've given your body that amount of time, usually within sort of 3 or 4 weeks, equally each week as you go forward, it'll get better and better. And that's why sometimes if it's better for an athlete to just regain, 9 or 10 kilos in the first month, and then from there afterwards, they might only gain 1 or 2 kilos over the next 2 or 3 months. I don't have a problem with that at all. If it means that it's going to be able to get them back to baseline, they can function better. There's a difference between if you're gaining 10 kilos in the first 2 weeks and then another 10 in the next 2 weeks, but usually that will just counteract. And again, it's a physiological adaptation that you experience when you are in the dieting condition.
Yeah. Also, the thing too is you need to also have all those strategies in place that you used in prep to not get hungry and to not have cravings. You need to keep them in place post-comp during that recovery phase. So, making sure that you don't have super tasty, calorie-friendly foods like we spoke about in the lecture I did. You want to make sure that you have a good amount of food volume, what food you select, how you cook it, those kind of things, hydration, sleep. Make sure you're doing all those things too. It's not just about, I just need more food, I need to eat, I need to gain more weight. How you're putting all that together too matters.
And this is the thing, like in contest prep, everyone that's in prep has a plan. They know what they're going to eat on a specific day. They know where the goalposts are, what they need to do. The recovery phase, in my opinion, is no different at all. And when I'm talking about the recovery phase, I'm not talking about from finishing the show to 12 weeks later. For me, the recovery period should really be a 3 to 4 week period. So where food is a lot higher and you're trying to restore some of that energy availability and restore some of that body composition. But once you get to that point where food is up and you start to see some of the symptomology of being in contest prep start to dissipate, that's when you can start to, in a lot of times, reduce the magnitude of the deficit, and you don't need to be, in that much more of a surplus. And equally, those things will usually correct themselves, but you should have a plan for week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. There should be that in your timeline. If your coach hasn't communicated that with you, you need to probe them and ask them, where do you want me to be at? Because, and everyone in this retreat probably thinks that I'm just saying this again and again, if you get the first 2 weeks right, you'll get the first 2 months right. If you get those right, your next 2 years, if you're in the improvement season, will be turnkey. You'll have no problems. But if you get those first 2 weeks wrong, and we've all experienced that, where you'll have an athlete who, I just want to finish, and then maybe they want to have a consult and they get it wrong and they don't listen, and then you end up having to try and restore that and fix it. And sometimes it can add a whole other year on your timeline of when you're planning to compete. And equally, the relationship with food, especially if there's someone who has an issue with purging or overfeeding, everyone is going to have elements of hyperphagia in contest prep, for those that are just like an increased desire to eat, and equally hedonic eating, so eating for pleasure, like, oh my God, this food is so amazing, this barbecue sauce is bringing me to life, but that does tend to dissipate, over time. So, yeah.
Any questions so far that anyone wants to throw out before I move on to more of these questions? No? Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so just regarding water intake and fiber, even in the off-season, people are tracking fats, carbs, and protein, but I've seen people don't track water and fiber as frequently in the off-season. So if somebody tracks it and somebody doesn't, what would be the difference?
Okay, so just in case it didn't go through the mic, so in comp prep, people track their fibre and their water, but not so much in the off-season. So the question is?
So what difference would it be if they do it in the off-season as well?
So
and is it important?
Would it be important to track that in the off-season as well?
I think so. As a golden rule, I usually say around about 40 mils per kilogram of body weight as far as fluid goes, but equally there's caveats to that. If you go to a warmer climate like you are here and you're seeing an increase in fluid loss via sweating, that also applies to sodium as well, because if you're sweating more, you're losing electrolytes you need to restore. But with fiber, everyone says like, oh, roughly, 14 grams per 1,000 calories, but equally, as you have anyone that has to eat, say, 4,500, 5,000 calories, I know for me, when my food's at its like top peak, I'm not eating 60 grams of fiber because I physically can't do it. My fiber is probably, to be honest, it's probably lower than when I'm in contest prep. It's probably between 32 and 35 versus when I'm in prep. It'll usually sit around about 40 because it's a nice sort of sweet spot.
Because you're probably putting more volume of food in to stay with.
But also, I'm more aware in the dieting condition from an immunological standpoint, the likelihood of me potentially being compromised. Again, you can't enhance immunological function, but you can prevent deficiency. So if I'm eating less, and already I'm a candidate, if I get sick, is my body, my immune system going to be sufficient to be able to fight off whatever pathogen is in my body? Versus in the off season, I'm well fed. We know that energy availability is a really, really important piece in terms of if someone's sick, if they're recovering from injury, one of the first things you want to do is make sure that you are not in a deficit. You're at maintenance or slightly above. So as far as fiber is concerned, it's natural to probably, and I think it's easier to want to get a bit more veg in prep. A, there's a satiation component to it, but B, also just to make sure that from a micronutrient intake and equally the food you're eating, you want a minimally processed diet, foods that are going to, again, make sure that you're not you can't enhance immunity. Everyone thinks, oh, you can boost vitamin E and vitamin D. It doesn't work like that. You have a threshold. It's like if I fill up this water bottle with water and I just keep dipping water in, it just spills out. You just excrete all those enzymes that you don't use. So it's the same thing, but there's a limit to when you have to push food up certain amounts. You can't keep taking fiber, in my experience, you can't keep taking fiber that high unless you're just a unicorn and you can just eat copious amounts of food. But equally, I would then say that you run the risk of causing distension we know now the more that you stretch the stomach, and that's why sometimes even in prep, trying to just chase fullness and satiation can be, I don't want to use the word deleterious because everyone will laugh, it can be deleterious, but because obviously if you're eating a lot, there's a lot of food going through gastric motility, then there is that element of just being really distended, and you stretch that, and when you diet, think of the stomach like a balloon, it takes more to fill it up, you're going to have enhanced hunger versus, I think there's normally a sweet spot. If you're eating above 3,500 calories, for me I think 30 grams of fiber, provided that you're getting it via minimally processed foods and not from protein bars, where you get like 8 grams. Everyone knows that I fucking hate protein bars. It's the worst thing that you can eat. But if you're getting it from vegetables, and there's a golden rule, I'm always like, whenever you're eating a meal, or at least 2 or 3 of your meals, they should have 5 or 6 different colors on the plate. So you want to have each day at least a couple of 100 grams of fruit, and ideally, 400 to 500 grams of vegetables. In the off season, sometimes that can be harder because throughout the day, I know for me, I don't want to eat veggies throughout the day. And to be brutally honest, I don't. I just have 400 grams of vegetables with my dinner every night because I know that if I put that in my meal 3 or 4, there's no chance that my next meal is going to go down.
Yes, I'm going to go down. That happened to me, remember?
Yeah.
I said to you, I was like, I don't know why, I'm just feeling super bloated because I started to bring food up post-comp, and you're like, are you having the same amount of vegetables you were having in prep? I was like, yeah, like, well, cut it in half.
Yeah.
Like, just having too much.
Yeah.
So,
and it makes a difference, isn't
it? It made it straight away, made a difference straight away. Any other questions? We good? Cool. All right. I think we've got a training question here. Oh no, here we go. Yep. Higher reps, lower weight, or lower reps, more weight? Tell me, Scotty.
Oh, okay.
If all was equal, and the movements, of course, everything was equal,
I think
which one builds better size?
At the moment, there's a lot of people tend to, a paper comes out and everyone's like, oh, I'm in this camp, and then someone comes up, like someone was telling me the other day, they're like, oh, did you see that study that came out that said there's no difference between lengthened partials as opposed to just doing normal reps? And that study was complete dog shit, which most people who understand scientific literature would support that. And I think it was Menno Helms's, it was one of his posts, which he actually, if you went through to all of the end of the slides, I think he actually said it's probably not the greatest design, and maybe, but equally, from a clickbait perspective, and no one's going to, want to read that post otherwise. But I think you need to find common ground between, all of those elements combined. I don't necessarily think that you should just do full range of motion. I think there's advantages, to be able to doing, performing movements in the shortened position as well as the lengthened position. I think that rest pause partials and intensifiers definitely play a role in it. Like all things, we need more research and more literature to support it. But I think if you're exposing your body, and again, if you think about training, essentially it's an insult. And if you think about homeostasis or baseline, any time that you expose your body or your connective tissue or your muscles, whatever it is, your central nervous system, to an insult or a stimulus that it is not accustomed to, you're going to get a response. And then hopefully following that, if you do all the things recovery-wise, you're going to get an adaptation response as well. So I think you probably need to have a blend between all of them, because if we're talking about heavier weight, lower volume, let's say that we're talking about a hack squat or a big compound movement, a deadlift, they're movements that would definitely fit that demographic. And I think anyone that's pulling big hip hinge compounds, most people here in the room know I'm a big advocate of that, for anywhere between usually 4 to 10 repetitions, sometimes even 3. But you're never going to see me or most of us in this room program, I want you to do rest pause partial clusters on a deadlift, and I want you to do drop sets, because it just, A, the systemic fatigue will destroy you, but B, you're going to break down, biomechanically, and you're going to end up using muscles that you're not intending to move. So, or injured, or a very good chance you're going to get injured. So, like all things, context, and I think you need to have a balance. You need to have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and this is the art of programming, of also managing where you stick that. If you've got leg day and you're doing 3 sets of heavy deadlifts, and then after that you're going to do 2 sets of stiff-legged deadlift with a dumbbell, then you're going to do a heavy squat component, maybe a hack squat, then you're going to go and do a pendulum squat, you're going to do a glute drive. The systemic fatigue is going to be, like, by the deadlift, you're probably cooked. Yeah. Which is why normally more program, then you might have like I know for my guys, if they have a deadlift, it'll usually be then followed by maybe like an isolation, a hamstring curl, something like that, and then that is it for that piece because we've achieved what we needed to get out of it. Equally, you'll probably see an intensifier on the hamstring curl, but there might only be 2 sets, sometimes even only a top set, provided it's a good quality set, depending on the athlete of that big compound. So, like all things, I think probably a balance between all of them, but knowing what exercise selection is relevant to the specific volume is super important.
Yeah, some exercises lend well to doing lower reps, some exercises lend well to doing higher. So obviously you may always need to pick one or the other or within that range for a specific exercise. But whichever camp you pick, you've got to train hard. So whether you say I lift heavy or I lift lightweight, it doesn't really matter, just train with intensity.
And from the research, we know that it's more proximity to failure. So Martin Ruffalo had a really good study on this in terms of the difference between going to absolute complete failure or going within 2 or 3 reps shy of that. And there's not really much of a difference from a cellular signaling and equally from an adaptation perspective. But the problem with training to failure, and this is why I like to program intensifiers usually on a set within a specific muscle group, to give an athlete an experience and also to help teach them where that lands, because we know through research as well that where most people's perception of failure is and where it actually is, there's a bit of a difference. I think it's between 5 and 7 reps in most cases, but equally if you've got a neophyte lifter who's not experienced in the lifting game, it could be like 15, 20 reps. I think pick it on like on the hack squat today, you were in a position where you were almost going to rack out, and I'm like, nah, there's no change. Everyone knows there's no change in your cadence. Everyone probably heard me say that a million times today. We're good to go. And I think it was like an extra 6 or 7 reps from where you were. How did you turn? And don't get me wrong, she was busting her ass to get to that point. But equally, the rep before the one she was about to terminate, there was no change in the cadence of that concentric phase. So I'm like, mechanically, we can keep going here. Discomfort-wise, yeah, it's pretty high because I can see your heart's beating out of your chest, your legs are shaking. I know that there's a lot of cellular swelling that's going on there, but equally, are you physically capable of getting more? You are. And then finding, even you were just saying at breakfast before, finding where that actual line is now, it gives you insight. And equally, everyone, myself included, I can be in the middle of a squat and I'm like, I want 8, and I'll get to that point and I'm like, I know that if there was 2 or 3 people here that perhaps, look up to you or want to train with you, if they're watching you, you'd probably go and get those last 2 reps. If you're really honest, they're there. So I'm like, you need to fucking take them. And I think sometimes it's those conversations where when we're training on our own, you need to be able to have that mental fortitude to say, you're all right, you need to go. It's a difference if your last rep is taking you 6 seconds to lock out. It's probably a good idea that you want to try and terminate there. But like all things, I think knowing where that threshold lies, and sometimes you just need someone to send it and to really show you what you're physically capable of, to show you, like, I have no doubt when you get on the hack squat next, you'll get to a point where you're like, I need to lock out, and then you'll be like, I reckon I've got 3 or 4 more here there, and you'll find it. You break it down, 1 rep at a time.
After being training many people, do you find that knowing, by looking at them in their cadence, knowing where their failure point may potentially be? Because I know for me, it's like almost my failure point is like this, and then all of a sudden it's like that.
Yep.
So like, yeah, you've seen me train, right? Yeah, so like, I'll pump out, say it's a second half rep, and it'll be pretty good, and then my final rep will be like this, super slow,
and then you're empty,
and then I'm done. Whereas some people, and MG will probably laugh because Brianna that works with him.
Yes, Aubrey, yes.
Brie, right? She is someone that is super slow for her last 10 reps. Like, you think she's done and she's still got 10 more in, and they're... So everyone's different. What's yours like?
I wonder if that is a female thing, because I'm just thinking back to my study that I ran with the bench press to failure, and there was a couple of times where I'm spotting and they're probably 6 or 7 reps from where they finish, but I'm like, oh, this is the last one. The metronome's still going, and they keep just still finding it. And I'm like, when is this thing going to end? Whereas the guys are literally like here, and then, not that they were in this study, but when you're spotting them, and then it's like, no, I'm done, and then you've got to pull a bar up.
Yeah.
So Don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a girl thing or a guy thing, but I know for myself, it's like I just tip over the edge straight away. Yeah.
I think on certain like exercises too, like if you say the hack squat, sometimes if you drop too quickly and you hit the stopping mechanism, you get a little rebound. That eccentric energy helps to give you a lift off. But I think if you're in an upper body pressing piece, but equally, I still probably think most guys who get to the bottom, it's like coming up, and then all of a sudden you're going back down. So,
and then I'm going to say, and then I need to pull you up.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we've got here. This will be a good one for you, Scotty. And it's not a very sciencey one, so it's all good. If a prep client is having water with oats, cream of rice, pre-workout, tea, coffee, do they have to measure it all the time, make sure it's exact? So I only say you because cream of rice is new. So you need to make sure that what you put in those mixes is always the same.
When I make cream of rice, I do, because I work off 3 to 3.5 mils per 1 gram cream of rice. So when you're making it, you get the right consistency, because anyone that's made it, there's nothing more frustrating than if you boil the kettle too much and you pour it in and it goes all clumpy, or if it gets too cold or you put too much and then it's ruined and you're like, fuck, I have to start again.
Yeah.
But I think...
So it's only really a cooking and a taste thing. Like even if, say you put less in today, I mean you put less in your meals, but you made sure you had more water to make sure you had the same amount of water every single day, it's probably the same. Right?
Well, that's the thing, like you should ideally want to hit that same range. I'm not like, did you hit exactly 3.5 litres today? No, I had 3.6, because in reality, if you had a bit more fluid than you usually would, you'll just go to the bathroom more and excrete it. But I think anything that you're, even if it's a diet soda, if it's water in your cream of rice, it's still fluid that you're consuming, so that definitely makes up part of your daily intake of fluid.
Yeah, for sure. The only way this would even matter is if you were, putting water to cook some meals, like in your rice, you want to cook that, or boil potatoes and things like that. But really, you should be weighing everything raw anyways. So how much water you put in it shouldn't really make a difference.
Yep.
Does anyone have any questions they want to throw out? Oh, you got one.
When you say get sick, as in like stomach sick, or you're saying it's just like you get a bad cold?
Like a cold or the flu or belly or something.
So, again, immunologically, you are a lot more compromised at the back end, and there's a good chance pretty much everyone will get sick at some point. You're a lot more susceptible. One of the reasons why I like to get a blood panel ASAP is to actually have a look at some of those, neutrophils and leukocytes and see where the white count is at, so that you have an idea. These are pretty low. They may not be like dangerously low, but if they're super, super low, it's like you need to be very mindful about public transport. And it may sound silly saying that, but it's like if someone is coughing and you inhale that, there's a good chance you're going to get sick, and your body's not in a position to be able to deal with that. So firstly, and that's another reason why we still want to make sure we're flooding your body with really good quality nutrients post-prep, so that you can give back to the system and just top up, fill your body up with good food. But when that happens, again, making sure the energy availability is, if you're post-prep, it should be elevated. Zinc acetate, there's some really good research around, I think 50 or 75, 75 megs of zinc acetate per day with the onset of any kind of symptomology pertaining to a cold or whatever, being sick, has been shown to shave off anywhere from 2 to 3 days of the life expectancy of whatever the cold is. That one there, we know that vitamin D3 in contest prep, obviously when we're in winter, we're prepping, we don't get that same sun exposure, and so again, there is a tight correlation between people that are deficient in vitamin D and upper respiratory tract infections, colds. So making sure that you're having at least 4,000 or 5,000 IU a day of vitamin D in prep is important, D3. And again, it's a fat-soluble vitamin, so you want to have that with some fats when you consume it. But otherwise, typically, and this is more anecdote, but finding the ability to get exposure to the sun, to go somewhere warmer. I had that with, it was one of the times that I prepped and I was really, really sick straight afterwards, and we went to Queensland like 2 days and I was crook as, and within like a day and a half, I was brand new again. An element of maybe being a bit more relaxed, but being in a warmer climate in the sun, and again, research-wise, people that do live in warmer climates are typically less often getting sick as opposed to those that live in, say, England, where it's cold.
Or Melbourne.
Yeah, or Melbourne, where, you get 10 seasons in a day. So, but they're the main ones that you can do, and just rest. And this is the thing, post-prep, if you do get sick, not training is a must for me, because again, your body is telling you that it's not in a state, it doesn't have the energy and it doesn't have the funds to support, getting you better. Anytime you go into the gym and train, if you're like, I'll just feel better when I train, it's just going to send you back to square one. So you literally want to make sure that, you're literally just resting, sleeping as much as you can, those food things that we spoke about, and then obviously prioritizing, getting as much food in as you can.
Yeah, common question is, I'm sick, do I reduce my food today?
No.
Yep.
Yeah. Literally one of the most important things you can do if you're injured, whether it's like, I've sprained my ankle or I've got a broken whatever, coming out of surgery, I've got the flu. One of the number one things that is shown time after time after time is that energy availability needs to be constant. If you're in a depth, and that's why there'll be times where I'll have athletes in prep and they'll get really sick and they're like, oh, I just want to dig on low food. And I'm like, even though it wasn't planned, and even if we're behind where we need to be, doesn't matter, because if we don't nip this in the arse now, 4 or 5 day sickness could turn into 3 or 4 weeks, and then you've really got a problem. So it's usually take away training, get rid of cardio, put food in, sleep, take time off work. You literally, if you want to get on top of it, you have to literally just go all in on that and accept that your weight is going to go up, but equally, again, if we think about, let's say that you're dieting and you're on, 1,500 calories and you're like, I'm going to bring your food up to baseline 2,000, and the next day your weight jumps. If you think about it logically, I'm having an extra 500 calories over the next 5 or 6 days, it's 3,000 calories. Again, working on that premise of 1 kilogram of mixed human tissues between 6,500 calories. If my weight's gone up, it's not because I've gained body fat, it's just glycogen restoration, fluid. You're usually probably taking any cold or flu tabs, which also fuck with your weight. You'll see edema and things like that. So all of those things are pretty normal. Maybe you're having vegetable soup, you're having more fluid, you're having more fibre.
Yeah.
So they're things that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. All right, 2 more. NBA fitness and sports model, back pose, is it hands up or can we do hands down like bikini? So we actually have some fitness and sports models. Do you want hands up still or hands down?
Hands up.
Hands up, hands up.
Absolutely.
Hands up, hands up, yeah. We
I
got,
like hands up.
Yeah, same. We got that question when we made that bikini change, and Australia was like, is this for sports and fitness too? Can it be for sports and fitness? We need to judge the back, and we also want to see that X. So the best way to see that is to show us it. So hands up. But we do see, and it's kind of rare, but it can happen, where some feds in some states will try to do like a hands down back pose in sports and fitness, which is like a coat hanger pose like this. Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's not what we're doing either. So it's hands up back pose for sports and fitness. Yeah, that one got pulled out on you, didn't it? Yeah. All right, last one. How much of a surplus do you need to be in for optimal growth in the off season?
Not as much as everyone thinks. I think in the improvement season, once you get to a phase where you're in a push-up or a gaining phase, ideally you should have a set, I like to work within a bandwidth, so it might be every 8 weeks or whatever, you have a projected rate of gain. For some weeks your weight will come up, some weeks it might fall back. If you're gaining 500 grams, 500 grams, 500 grams, there's a good chance that you're probably gaining a little bit, too quickly. I think depending on the athlete, where they're at on their training journey, anywhere from sort of 0.2 to 0.4% of body weight is a nice sweet spot to be in, whilst obviously managing that, overall, where do we think our ceiling from a body composition is in how far can we push up. There's also other elements like for females looking at the menstrual cycle and things like that. But if you're consistent with what you're eating, you're weighing in every single morning and your weight is trickling up each week and you're training hard, you're exposing yourself to stimulus you're not accustomed to, you're eating at least close to 2 grams of protein per day, you're sleeping at least 7 hours, there's a pretty good chance that you're acquiring new tissue. I think a lot of people used to be in the camp, and in early days I probably thought so as well, and again I think it's context dependent, but there's times where being a bit heavier sometimes, if it allows you to operate at a level where you can do things in the gym that perhaps you can't when you're a little bit lighter from a pulling perspective, I think sometimes that can warrant that. Like sometimes I know for myself, I might push up a little bit heavier than maybe I should be if I'm sitting around 101, 102 and I'm on stage at 83, 84. That's a long way away from scale weight perspective, but equally, if you can pull off Like when we mini cut, we usually pull off, it could be 7 or 8 kilos, and you can do it in a couple of weeks. It's not a hard thing to be able to do that. And if the trade-off is that you can pull, 5-6 plates very comfortably for a good amount of weight on a deadlift, whereas at 92, 93 you just can't do that, then it's like, that is a trade-off it's willing to have. But I think for the most part, as long as your weight, you're staying within that range of around about 0.2% of the body weight is probably the lower end.
Yeah, it's low.
But I think one of the things that most people need to be aware of is you don't need to make changes every week. Like if your coach is not, I think a lot of people are like, oh, he didn't make any changes to my program this week. And I've had the same exercise for 6 or 7 weeks straight, because change is sexy, but equally consistency is not. But what yields long-term results, and again, we use the analogy of every time you go into the gym, you make a deposit. Every time you're eating a meal that aligns with your nutrition intervention, it's a deposit. And those deposits compound over time. And the idea is that once it's time to start prep, you cash in those deposits, and again, you can see who has been saving really, really well and who has perhaps not.
What about if you're like at the top end of your weight for the off season, and then you're pretty much staying there, but you're getting stronger in the gym, your lifts are going up. Are you gaining muscle if your weight's not going up?
Well, this is the thing, there's a ceiling, because if energy availability is good and you have sufficient body mass, you can still oxidize free fatty acids and use that as energy. And that's why typically we'll see overweight people when they first start weight training. We see that recomposition where fat mass will come down, but there'll be a change in fat-free mass. So if you are at that higher end and your weight doesn't need to increase anymore, you can absolutely still be making gains. You probably are. It's just that you don't need to keep putting more food in because you've got those reserves there to draw on if you need them.
Yeah. Awesome. Any questions before we wrap up? Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.